الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Inshallah ta'ala we'll go through the tafsir of the ayat of As-Siyam and Ramadan from Surah Al-Baqarah, verses 183, and it goes all the way to 188. We won't finish them all tonight inshallah, but we'll see inshallah ta'ala what we cover tonight inshallah between Maghrib and Isha. So verse 183 from Surah Al-Baqarah, the ayat that talks about Ramadan and fasting Ramadan. First, you guys covered by Shaykh Nashat the fiqh or the ahkam of As-Siyam. And when we talk about the tafsir of the ayat that would refer to some of the ahkam, it is not meant that we go through all of the ahkam and all of the rulings of fasting while making the tafsir of the ayat. And that's how the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, they go together. They're never separated when it comes to submission and following and so on. And this is by itself is clear evidence that how would a person fast and what breaks the fast and what's the pillars of fasting and things like this. This is not mentioned all in details in the Quran. It's in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. But we'll go through the tafsir, and there's a subject of the tafsir, which is even the ulama, they put compiled books of tafsir with regards to ayatul ahkam, the ruling, or the verses of al-ahkam, the verses of fiqh matters, rulings. And this is a subject in the tafsir, of course. But we'll start right away, inshallah ta'ala, and see. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us with the ayat of the Quran. And learning this, as mentioned before, just the fact that we are in Sha'ban, towards the end of Sha'ban, sitting in one of the houses of Allah, learning ayat of the Quran that talks about fasting, this is an act of ubudiyyah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as we will see in the tafsir, that when you have an act of worship or a characteristics that is mentioned, say for example for the believers, the more you perfect that characteristic, the more you get rewards. So for example, if you say to someone, oh student, study well, right? So if he studies, the more he studies, the more he is a good student. The less he studies, that means he is not as good student as someone else. And this is something that we would see in the verses. So anything to do with Ramadan, even before Ramadan, increases the rewards for the believers and makes it a mean to achieve what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us in Ramadan. And to seek help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it's only by the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for those who would attain the rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Ramadan and in other than Ramadan. And the more we talk about it, the more we would see how much it's something that should never be wasted whatsoever, as the ayat would say. The first ayah 183, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. The translation of the ayah, as we know, I would read the translation. It says, O you who believe, observing the fasting is prescribed for you as it was prescribed for those before you, that you may become al-muttaqun. The ayah is clear that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is calling the believers. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu. And the ayat that starts with Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, after it, it's either a command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we need to observe, or something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade us from. As Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, he said, إِذَا سَمِعْتَ يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا فَرْعِهَا سَمْعَكَ. If you hear يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, give it your ears, because after it is either a command for you to do or something that you are forbidden from doing. And many verses, of course, in the Quran starts with يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, specifically, or more, not all of them, but most of them in the verses of al-ahkam, in the verses of rulings, because it's either commands or something haram. And just Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu has great importance. And since we read it a lot, then we need to have certain meanings in our hearts, as the ulama they mention when it comes to Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu. It says, yeah, oh, you, when you call someone. أيها الذين, أي, this is by itself is a munada. And الذين آمنوا is another munada, 3 times. So it's not, يعني, when you say, oh, you have believed. It's being stressed within يا أيها الذين آمنوا that the believers are being called. Not just any call. By ya and by ay. And then الذين آمنوا. These 3 types of calling the believers. And who's the one that is calling them? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And saying الذين آمنوا after يا أيها. Right? Not saying the believers should fast. No, it's saying, oh, you who have believed. So calling the believers and making clear who are the ones that are being called. الذين آمنوا. And الذين آمنوا, this is mu'arrafa, this is known because the ism al-mawsul, الذين آمنوا, those who believed. So they are mentioned with the characteristics of al-iman, which is the most valuable thing whatsoever. And it's being stressed again with ya. So their attention is focused. That's why, as Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, when he said, if you hear ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, if you're walking and someone is calling you, right, that means you have to give that person all of your attention. And who's the one that is calling? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Rabbul Alameen, the Most High subhanahu wa ta'ala, the All-Powerful, the Almighty, is saying yeah, calling the believers. It's munada. Harf nida is calling the believers, O you who have believed. So therefore, it's not just, again, something that we seek blessings by reciting and that's it. This is khitab. We are being addressed by this call by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we have to have listish'ar. We have to feel that in our hearts when we hear Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. And this is how he said it. فَرْعِهَا سَمْعَكَ. Give it your ears because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is calling you. And the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is calling the believers, because if you are believers, then what comes afterwards, you have nothing but to submit yourself. Act based on the fact that you are a believer. So, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, if you are believers, then fulfill this. Then and al-iman, if it's established, everything becomes easy. Whether it's submitting ourselves to the rulings of the ahkam, fasting becomes easy. Easy in the sense that you're doing it with the love of Allah, fear of Allah, hope for the rewards from Allah. If someone is a disbeliever, he can't do it. You'd say, why would he torture himself like this? And he would think that this is something very difficult. So what carries the believers to do it is al-iman, is faith, al-iman, with the proper also belief in al-iman. Al-iman yazid wa yanqus, increases and decreases. Yazid bil-ta'a, increases with the good deeds, decreases with the bad deeds. And that's why weakness of al-iman would cause the command not to be observed in the most perfect way. And as a sign of someone that has strong iman, that he would submit himself and he perfect the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with ilm, with proper knowledge. So therefore, what is meant here is those who have al-iman, they ought to complete their iman, they ought to have strong iman, so that they submit themselves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A side note of this, in anything in our life, if you have a dispute between 2 people, right, and we were talking about this morning, you can say all kinds of things. You can say a hadith and ayat of the Quran, and people are not listening to what you're saying because they're more occupied into the dispute that they have. And each one they want to be victorious over the other one. But imagine that these 2 people in dispute, they are sincere, and you tell them, I'll give you a week to read the Quran, to make salah, do good deeds, increase your iman, and come back after 1 week, and focus on what you're saying. If they sincerely would do this, the dispute won't be the same as they did a week before. If their iman is strong, the matter becomes very easy. Very easy. Submission completely to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from them. There is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from them, from each one of them, and from them both. It doesn't have to be that they both forgive each other. It doesn't have to be one forgive the other. And it doesn't have to be that one would ask for his right. Allah knows best. And that's why it requires ilm. What is the best for their situation? And that's why they would go to a person of knowledge or so. and seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from them in that particular thing, this is their goal, this is their objective, even if it's against their own self. That's how the Sahaba radiallahu anhum used to be upon this. The ones that would have a dispute with this are the hypocrites. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. So, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. This is the key to all kinds of goodness in our life, to strengthen our iman, to be among those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called them, and to feel this great favor and the great honor that a person is among the believers. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ. كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمْ. This is before the command comes. This is the command. كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمْ. It has been written alaykum, upon you. And written, this is the literal meaning of kutiba. And kutiba, if it's mentioned in the Quran, this is one of al-fadh al-wujub. This is one of the words of obligations. How would you know that something is an obligation? That Allah iftarada alaykum, Allah made it fard upon you. Allah kataba alaykum, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prescribed upon you. So this is clearly that it's fard. Kutiba alaykum. And this is actually one of the subjects of the Quran, also in ulum al-Quran. It's called the kulliyatul Quran. The words that is at all times in the Quran means one thing. And this is one of the ways to easy learn the tafsir of the Quran. Some words at any part of the Quran means the same thing. So it's important to, even one of the first thing to study in tafsir is these words. One of which is kutiba alaykum. Kutiba alaykum, that means it's fard upon you, it's an obligation, and it's very obvious in this regard. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that ordained that upon the believers. Also, if you look in the Quran, you would find some verses, it says, كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَأَغْلِبَنَّ أَنَا وَرُسُلِي, for example. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordained or prescribed that He will be, the words of Allah will be victorious, and the deen of Allah and His messengers. And here, kutiba in the passive tense. Is there the wisdom? Of course, there's everything. There is wisdom in the Quran. But this is sufficient that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordained upon us. Kutiba alaykum. Some of the ulama in the tafsir, they said it's not mentioned katab Allahu alaykum because the ahkam or the rulings requires struggle, requires for the person to be patient. So it's also only mentioned kutiba alaykum. As a way that you'd find the other verses has more into the victory from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the mercy of Allah. So that the name of Allah, this is again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, as Abu Hayyan and others, they said that in their tafsir, that this is because of the struggle that a person would go through. So the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioned, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. So, kutiba alaykum as-siyam. As-siyam has been ordained or prescribed upon you. So, as-siyam, what is as-siyam? As we know, is linguistically means al-imsak, to withhold from doing certain things. And of course, in the Shara, al-imsak an al-muftirat, to stay away from what breaks the fast from Fajr till Maghrib time. And al-muftirat is part of the Shara, and it's mentioned here in the verses, some of it. So, this is by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's described and the details of it in the speech and the actions of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. The Quran, it's all together, one is related to the other. لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ لِمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو اللَّهَ وَالْيَوْمَ الْآخِرَ. How to fast? You have in the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam the best example. So كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ. The same way as it was prescribed upon those who were before you. So the same thing has been prescribed on the nations before you, the Jews and the Christians, and even before that. As I say, from the time of Nuh alayhi salam, there is always act of fasting for every messenger that is being sent. Doesn't have to be exactly the same way, but it's the ibadah itself is something that has been ordained by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon the believers. And it shows that this is not something new. Even the Arab in Jahiliyyah, they would fast. As they used to fast the day of Ashura. They had that from what has been from the deen of Ibrahim alayhi salam. So fasting is something that is clear, and it's been before in the nations before. The significance, as the ulama, they say why it's mentioned like this, كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ, to show that this is a ibadah, that it's such an important one, that it's not just all of a sudden that it's for the last ummah. It's a ibadah that the human beings, the believers, are in need of it at all times, from the beginning of times. And also it shows that it's to make it easy for the believers, that it's not something that is a burden on you, it's something that is a continuation of what has been done before. So you are nothing but a continuation of the same commands from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that helps when a person knows that there are others. And this is what also one of the things that when people fast, it makes it easy for them that others are fasting. So in which if a person is the only one fasting, in front of everybody they're eating the best meals and things like this, it's a little bit difficult. But when everybody's fasting, it becomes easier for the person. That's why if you're traveling, for example, and you're going for Umrah, right, and everybody in the plane, or most of the people in the plane, they're fasting, they don't have to. They're traveling, they can break their fast. There's rukhsah for them. And they should not be looked down upon if they're breaking their fast. Even if they're healthy and strong and it's comfortable, air conditioning and first class, it doesn't matter. They can break their fast. But if everybody's fasting, it might be easier for some to continue to fast, right? Because it's easier that way. And that's why the ruling of when to break your fast, as it will be also mentioned in the ayat, is it better to fast when you're traveling, or it's better that you break your fast? It depends. If it's easier for you to break your fast, then break your fast. This is what is according to the Sunnah. If it's makes it easier for you if you fast, then fast. But again, at the end, you are the Amir of your own self. You can break your fast or you don't. But there is, in the ayat, as we would see, al-marad, or sickness, is mentioned first and then traveling. So as if this is, for traveling, it's for sickness, it's more of an excuse. For traveling, it's up to you, and you have the option whether to break the fast or whether not to break the fast. But here to make it easy, كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. لعلكم تتقون, so that you would be among those who have taqwa. And لعلكم, it gives the reason. And لعلكم is not always, when it's mentioned, it's refers to the reason, but it's for sure refers to the reason if there's a command mentioned before it. So يا أيها الناس اعبدوا ربكم, this is a command, worship your Lord, الذي خلقكم والذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. So the reason or the wisdom behind al-ibadah is to have the taqwa of Allah, because it's after a command. And here also يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. So this is the objective of the fasting, so that you be among the people of taqwa. And this is the hikmah. This is the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for fasting to be prescribed. We'll talk about some of the benefits of some of the ulama also mentioned in this. And of course, the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by itself is a huge subject in the Quran. This is the wasiyah of the awwaleen wal akhirin. What's a good word for wasiyah? Because it's usually referred to the wasiyah of a person when he's dying, he gives a wasiyah, bequeath, or a will. But it's the wasiyah is not advice. It's the strongest words and intentions and zeal when you're advising someone that you might not see him again. If there's someone in front of you that you care about so much, the most beloved person to you, right? And you might not see that person again. You're not going to be giving him some words in a gradual form. You're not going to tell him, okay, let me tell him this now, and then later I'll give him something more. No, you might not see him again. So you would, the same thing when a person is dying, he would say the most important things to those who he is leaving behind. So this is what the wasiyah means. So when you want to advise someone of something, and that's why when they say wasiyatul awwalina wal akhirin, the most important thing to give as an advice to anyone at all times, the most important one is the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَقَدْ وَصَّيْنَا الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ وَإِيَّاكُمْ أَنِ اتَّقُوا اللَّهِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying وَلَقَدْ, and laqad, lam, and the qad, not just qad. That means it's very stressed. Indeed, for sure, verily. We wassayna, we gave that stress, advice, and command, and You can go on and on with what was signa, the significance of it. Those who received the books before you, the Jews and the Christians, and yourself, this ummah, and ittaqullah. One word, one command, and ittaqullah, fear Allah, shield yourself from the punishment of Allah, be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is always the objective of any action. This is how the believers are, and the relationship between al-iman wa taqwa Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. And as we heard many times, the most comprehensive definition of the taqwa, which is taqwa, who's from the tabi'in, the famous one, that when he was asked at the time of fitna, there was fitna. So how can we deal with the fitna? He said, أطفئوها taqwa. Distinguish it with the taqwa. There's a fitna, you distinguish the fitna with the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, أن تعمل بطاعة الله, that you would act by the obedience of Allah. على نور من Allah, from light from Allah. That means is not from your own self, from the wahy revelation from Allah, the acts of obedience, stay away from haram in details. ترجو ثواب Allah, you hope for the rewards from Allah. So it's the acts of obedience to Allah, from knowing the truth, from the light from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the rewards of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And that you stay away from ma'asiyatillah. You stay away from the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ala nurin min Allah. Based on the knowledge, based on the light from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that this is haram. Takhafu iqab Allah. That you, because you fear the punishment of Allah. This is what at-taqwa is. So it's both the acts of obedience and staying away from haram, seeking rewards from Allah, having the fear of Allah, based on ilm, on knowledge that this is what Allah commanded and this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade, and therefore this is in every aspect of our life, in every word, in every speech, in every actions. So this is لعلكم تتقون. Imam al-Sa'di rahimahullah, and if you don't mind, let me say what he mentioned here as far as benefits, that he says one of the significance of this ayah, فيه تنشيط لهذه الأمة. Like for example, as it's been prescribed for the nations before you, it gives tanshit. Tanshit gives this ummah to be energetic, that they want to fulfill this command of Allah because the same thing has been prescribed on the nations before. Which basically بأنه ينبغي لكم أن تنافسوا غيركم في تكميل الأعمال. That you need to compete with others to perfect your actions. Are the nations before you better than you? Definitely not. This ummah is the best ummah ever brought to mankind. The Sahaba radiallahu anhum and those who follow them. So therefore the ummah should make this as in a reality and in practicality, that they submit themselves to the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to do it in the most perfect way. And that it's not from the heavy things. So وأنه ليس من الأمور الثقيلة التي اختصيتم بها. This is not a heavy thing because it also has been for the nations before. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the hikmah, the wisdom, لعلكم تتقون, as he says, فإن الصيام من أكبر أسباب التقوى. One of the major means and reasons for taqwa is الصيام. The goal of the ibadah is the taqwa of Allah, as we heard in the ayah in the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah. And then this is a specific ibadah that leads to taqwa. So that means this is one of the most effective ways to attain the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if fasting is done in the right way. And therefore, also when you read in the Quran, you would find وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةِ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةِ. Salah and zakah are mentioned together. Salah and nafaqa, sadaqat is mentioned together. But not siyam is not repeated all the time, as the zakah is repeated, and so on. Also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. But you see that fasting is something that is required for a month, a year. But the command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for people to attain or to be upon fasting that leads to the taqwa of Allah, one of the most important means. But some said because of the salah and the sadaqah, it's like the rights of Allah versus the rights of the human beings. But again, fasting here is that it's been prescribed on the nations before, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it easy for you. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, one of the major means of a taqwa. because it has obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and staying away from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade, from something that is we are created to be attached to, and we love to eat, we love to drink. It's the necessity of life and the means of desire. So when a person leaves that, imanan wa ihtisaban, based on his iman, believing that this is the command of Allah, and they don't ask what's the purpose of it or what's the wisdom behind it. That's why when people say to their children, fast so that you can feel for the poor when they're poor, don't tell them these things. We're fasting based on al-iman. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us, so we submit ourselves to Allah. There's a wisdom behind it, one of which is to feel for the poor, sure. But say that after 5 minutes, after establishing the tawheed in the hearts. It's iman wa ihtisaban. Because of the matter of belief, seeking rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, to attain the taqwa of Allah, to be obedient to Allah. And that's why if a person is sincere, whether we are young or old, a great opportunity. If someone that is away from the orders of Allah, a Muslim, a young Muslim, tell him, do you want to be obedient to Allah? Do you want to be steadfast on the deen of Allah, and also that you would love to be obedient to Allah and steadfast on the deen of Allah? A Muslim would say, yes, I would love to, but he has maybe some misconceptions, or he thinks that this would deprive him from lots of fun, or it's difficult, or it's whatever. So now we have a month, 30 days, fast. Everybody fasts, for the most part, alhamdulillah. So for those who are going to fast, then do just an extra little work with fasting. Fast in the right way. You're going to fast anyway. So perfect your fasting and make your fasting only for the sake of Allah. Nobody can see you fasting. Right? So this is a secret ibadah between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So make it sincerely for the sake of Allah, and make it as a mean for you to attain the taqwa of Allah. Because the people of the taqwa, they enjoy the taqwa more than the people of sins enjoy their sins. So it's an opportunity to attain, because لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, this is such a great favor from Allah that in 1 month, a person can be among the people of al-muttaqeen. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, that's the goal. The beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, it's the entire life, the entire ibadah, make you attain at-taqwa. Now as-siyam, make you attain the taqwa. So how can that month be missed? So لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, obeying the orders of Allah. The fasting person leaves what Allah forbade for him, that his nafs is inclined towards. He's seeking the pleasure of Allah, to be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, hoping by leaving these things by the thawab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Also, وَمِنْهَا, from these benefits that leads to the taqwa, أَنَّ الصَّائِمَ يُدَرِّبُ نَفْسَهُ عَلَى مُرَاقَبَةِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. The Sa'im, he trained himself one day after the other to be watchful, to know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is seeing him. So he leaves what he desires when he has the ability to do it. You have the ability to go just maybe not even few steps. You just put food in your mouth, or you drink a cup of water, and you have the ability to do so. But what prevents you from it is the fear of Allah. 1 minute before the adhan is called, you would never ever dare even to drink a sip of water. It's just 1 minute, it doesn't make a difference. Or the same thing with Fajr, knowing the rules. This is all taqwa. This is something that makes the people, they have the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if they do it in the right way. Also, as he says, أن الصيام يضيق مجرى الشيطان. Shaitan, he runs away. I mean, the shayateen are, from the beginning, from the first night of Ramadan, as the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he said that maradat al-shayateen, وتسلسل فيه الشياطين, the shayateen is chained. And is it all the shayateen? Yes. Because some say it's maradatul jinn, the fiercest among them. No, all of them. All of them also can mean the hadith, all of the shayateen. So why there is still evil present, there is shayateen al-ins, they do their work. And there is the whisper of oneself. Right? So that's another great opportunity for someone to be among the people of taqwa. You are free from the intense whispers of the shayateen in Ramadan. So more help, because the whispers of the shayateen is one of the deterrent, most important factor that people turn away from the deen of Allah, because the shayateen, they whisper evil to the people. So with fasting, that makes it easy. وَمِنْهَا, as he says, أَنَّ الصَّائِمَ فِي الْغَالِبِ تَكْثُرْ طَاعَتُهُ. For the most part, most likely that the fasting person, if he fasts, he would have more good deeds to be done. And الطاعات من خصال التقوى, and to do acts of obedience to Allah, this is from the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that increases the rewards. What is the best act of goodness and obedience to Allah while a person is fasting? This is because of the next ayah, شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن. The ulama always say Al-Quran. The best deed to be done after fulfilling the obligations is the Quran, to read Quran. And this is very clear in the life of the Prophet ﷺ, the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, and the Imma of the Deen, where once the month of Ramadan, it's month of Quran, إطعام الطعام, feeding others, and this is after fulfilling the obligations. And that's why a person should train himself during the day reading to the best of one's ability, during the night listening to the Quran and the Salah, and whatever a person has the zeal and the mean, he should read Quran as much as he can. Because this is the thing that is mentioned with Ramadan as it will come. The last thing that he mentions is that أن الغني إذا ذاق ألم الجوع أوجب له ذلك مواساة الفقراء المعدمين. When a person is rich, when he tastes the hunger, the pain of hunger, then this can cause him to have a feeling for those who are hungry from the poor. And this is from خصال التقوى. And this is another thing, is that many people, they don't even know what does it mean to have the pain of being hungry and not having means of sustenance, or there's no food. So this is something different. If you're hungry and you know that you're going home and you're going to get food, you're hungry and you complain, and I'm so hungry and I'm so hungry, but there is food. But imagine a person is hungry and there is no food. So therefore, it's shame upon those who have food to leave anyone on the face of earth hungry and don't have food and don't have the means to attain food. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Razzaq. And He subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tests people with one another. He tests the rich with the poor. So if there's poor that they're not having the means of sustenance, the rich are to be blamed. Where are they? To help the poor with this. So one of the means to help the people to do that is to achieve the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by fasting. The next ayah, أياما معدودات. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أياما معدودات, counted days. And this is another thing to make it so easy, that the fasting is only counted days. It's not the entire year, it's counted days. You can count the days, and before you know it, it ends. So this is all means to help the person to make it easy for himself. And this is one of the ways to make oneself see things in an easy way. You need to convince yourself for something that you might think is difficult or overwhelming. No, make it easy for yourself. Think at the end of it. It's only counted days. Once you have this in you, whether it's in Ramadan, other than Ramadan, you'll be able to perfect your actions. Salatul Tarawih, you're standing, it's only a few minutes, or an hour, 2 hours. Right? So what? Give up on this 2 hours that you're going to have any thing for your desire. And it gets over with. And at the end of the month, all of the tiredness goes away. The same thing in Hajj, for example. As Shaykh Zidan rahimahullah, when people were Hajj and suffering and less lack of sleep and things like this, and he would say these types of things to the people. It's only 3-4 days. Just convince yourself. And it's not just that it's very small amount of actions, so perfected. Not that it's few days and then just relax about it. Just perfected because it's only few days. So أياما معدودات, which is the farda that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala obligated upon the believers. So explaining or describing, having the wasf of these days, that it's ma'dudat, it's counted ones. And by the way, you know that in the Quran, when they said وَقَوْلًا تَمَسَّنَا النَّارُ إِلَّا أَيَّامًا مَعْدُودَةً. Another verse, أَيَّامًا مَعْدُودَات. Sometimes it's ma'duda, with the ta' marbuta at the end. Sometimes it's ma'dudat. Both is linguistically how things are. So this is when you have something that is when you have jam' or plural of something that غير العاقل. العاقل is human beings. If it's other than the human beings, you can make jam', whether it's to have it as feminine or plural or as one. This is both are correct. So you can say أياما معدودة, or you can say أياما معدودات. If there's a difference between both in meanings, Allah knows best. But I'm just saying, for someone, sometimes they ask why there's معدودة here, معدودات. This is how things are. So أياما معدودات, counted days. فمن كان منكم مريضا, so whoever among you, منكم, مريضا, sick, أو على سفر, or upon traveling, فعدة من أيام أخرى. فعدة, then عدة, also like معدودة, عدة, counted, من أيام أخرى, from other days. This is also one of the amazing things. And some of the ulama in some of the books of fiqh, they followed the same pattern like this. The exceptions are mentioned right away, which shows that to give it also means of ease, right? So, يا الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام, fasting is prescribed upon you. That means everybody. But then the exception comes here, unless you're sick or you're traveling. So not for everybody. It's for everybody except those who are sick and traveling. And this is always the ways of the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And that's why the ayat and the hadith, they don't contradict each other. Nobody would ever say, is that ayah contradicting the first ayah? No, it's not. This is showing that there's an exception. And it doesn't have to say, oh, you who believers that are not sick and so on, fasting is, it doesn't have to be like this. Fasting is upon everyone. Except those who are sick and traveling, then it's not an obligation upon them. فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ. The rulings of marad, what is it? And marad is sickness. And the sickness that would makes it difficult for the person to fast, or it would make the sickness prolonged. Sometimes a person is towards the end of his sickness, he can fast. But if a Muslim trustworthy doctor, for example, would say that if you fast, this can prolong your sickness, then it's better to break the fast. If a sick person fasted, right, even if he wronged himself, because sometimes a person might, fasting is obligation upon him to break his fast. But say a sick person, if he fasts, his fast is valid. But he doesn't have to, and in some cases he should not fast because this can harm him. The same thing with the traveling person. So فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا, and this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of the human beings, He's the one that ordained upon them the excuses and the exceptions. So deen yusr, the deen is easy by the deen itself. We don't need to make something to make the deen easy. The deen has already been eased for the believers because it's all part of the deen. So this is because it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَامٍ أُخَرٍ. عِدَّة, that means, and it's nakira, counted days. It did not say when specifically, and it did not say that it has to be consecutively, which is of course known by the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. But it's also in the word فَعِدَّة. Then عِدَّة. That means you make the days up after Ramadan. And you don't have to do it again one after the other. It's best to finish them as quickly as you can, of course, but it's not mandatory. فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَامٍ أُخَرٍ. So the rulings of sickness, the ruling of traveling, this can be many different ahkam there. And some of the things that are new, for example, with regards to medicine and things of that nature, as we talked about it, that anything that goes into the normal passage of food, even if it's not nutrition, that breaks the fast. Because it used to be also present in the past, and there's no doubt about this, and there's no differences of opinions. But the things that get injected, if it's a medicine, it doesn't break the fast, like insulin or medicine. But if a person is injected with something that is nutrition, vitamins or something that is nutrition, then it breaks the fast. Because one of the objectives of fasting is that a person is staying away from what is nutritionist, like the food and the drinks and so on. The thing for the asthma, it's I'm not sure if there's a kind that has some water or something that can goes into the stomach. If it's only to the chest, then it doesn't break the fast. But it goes if something goes to the stomach, and it's known, then that breaks the fast. So again, with rulings, this is if a person is sick, then he's excused. And when someone is sick, he gets the full reward as if he is fasting or as if he is doing whatever he used to do when he was not sick. As the Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِذَا مَرِضَ الْعَبْدُ أَوْ سَافَرْ كُتِبَ لَهُ مَا كَانَ يَعْمَلُ صَحِيحًا مُقِيمًا. If the slave of Allah is sick or travels, he will be given the reward as if he was not sick and as if he was not traveling. So فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخْرَى. There is a rule in the deen of Islam, within the deen of Islam, as we heard, that when something becomes difficult, the ease comes right afterwards. So the difficulty is not going to be there forever. مشقة تجلب التيسير. But this is within the ahkam of the deen. The end of the verse, وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ يُطِيقُونَهُ فِدْيَةٌ طَعَامُ مِسْكِينٍ. And as for those who يُطِيقُونَه from a taqa, from the ability, from energy, that means those who have the ability to fast, فدية وعلى الذين يطيقونه فدية طعام مسكين, to give fidya, to give ransom of feeding a poor. Those who have the ability, they can give fidya, a ransom to feed a poor, and they don't have to fast. This was abrogated. So this, according to that one meaning of tafsir, because it has two meanings. One meaning is, as Salama ibn al-Akwa radiallahu anhu, he said in the hadith in Sahih Muslim clearly, that this how things were in the beginning. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordained fasting upon the ummah, it was if someone doesn't want to fast, that's fine, but feed a poor person for every day. And then this was abrogated in the next verse about Shahr Ramadan, which made the fasting obligation upon everyone except the sick and the traveling, and that's why it's repeated again in the next verse. So this is abrogated with that regards. وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ يُطِيقُونَهُ, those who have the ability to fast, but they don't want to fast, فِدْيَةٌ طَعَامُ مِسْكِينٍ, to give fidya as a ransom to feed a poor. And what is the other opinion, which is also part of the first opinion, that the ruling of that is not abrogated, it stayed for الشيخ الكبير والمرأة والحامل, as Ibn Abbas رضي عنهما, he said. The ruling stayed for the old person and for the woman pregnant or breastfeeding, or someone that has a sickness that the people do not know a cure of, a permanent one. So in that case, they feed a poor person for every day. For the pregnant woman and the breastfeeding, yes, some had said this, and the opinion that we mentioned before is that she counts the days that she broke her fast, and she should keep it so that she can make up these days later on, even if it after some years. But if a year passes and she didn't make the days, then she feed, or the guardian of the child, if she broke her fast for the child, then he feeds for every day a poor person. So then with that, the ayah or this part of the ayah is not abrogated. It stayed for the old people or those who have sickness, there's no cure for it. Known, they would feed a poor person for every day. How much is the feeding? It's nisfu sa', which is something less than 1 kilogram of grains, for example. So say 1 kilogram of grains, 2.5 pounds or less of something that is saved, or you cook food for the poor person to eat, to be full, that if he eats, he doesn't have to eat for the rest of the day, something that will keep him full. Either or, this is fine, but it has to reach the poor as food. وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ يُطِيقُونَهُ فِدْيَةٌ طَعَامُ مِسْكِينٍ فَمَنْ تَطَوَّعَ خَيْرًا فَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَهُ. Whoever تطوع, volunteer to fast, whoever would do goodness, فَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَهُ, it's best for him, it's good for him. So this is, again, for those who were fasting, if they had the choice before, this is definitely is best for them. And also refers to, فَمَنْ تَطَوَّعَ, here refers to the fidya, not to the fasting. Like if you give fidya, if you feed a poor, the minimum is, as we heard, something small. But if you want to do more, mashallah, فَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَهُ. So if it's feeding one person, you give instead what is sufficient for 10 people to that person, to that poor person, mashallah, this is good for you. فَمَنْ تَطَوَّعَ خَيْرًا فَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَهُ. Whoever do more of goodness, then this is good for him. And that's why the more you increase with the ibadah, the more there's goodness, of course, and no doubt. وَأَن تَصُومُوا خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. And that you fast is better for you. So, which means fasting is better than the fidya when it was an option. Fasting is best and it's better for the fidya. And some of the ulama, they said that this is an evidence that for a traveling person, if traveling is not difficult for him, fasting is better for him. right? But again, even if it's not difficult, it's permissible for him to break his fast. But if it's easy traveling, it's better to fast because anyway you have to make up the day. But a person should not feel bad if he's in Ramadan and he's breaking his fast because he's traveling. And the Prophet ﷺ, the people would break the fast, some people would fast, and the Prophet ﷺ, none would condemn the other. And one of the hadith in Sahih Muslim, even those who broke their fast, they got more rewards in one incident when they were traveling and it was very sunny, and the Sahabi narrated the hadith. He said that we put our hands on our head because of the heat, the extreme heat, and it was Ramadan, and some people were fasting and some people were not fasting. So when they stopped to rest, those who were not fasting, they came down and they put their tents and they fixed the place for everyone. And those who were fasting, they went down and they just collapsed. They just fell on the ground because of the tiredness. So after that happened, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, ذهب المفطرون اليوم بالأجر. Al-Muftirun, those who broke their fast, they surpassed everyone with the rewards today because they did all the work. So it shows that sometimes it's not what we think is more rewardable. And it shows how the ummah help one another. Those who Muftirun, they did not say, why don't you break your fast? Why you're making yourself suffer? Right? They found this as an opportunity for them to help those who are fasting. And the fasting ones, they did not condemn the other ones, and so on. فمن تطوع خيرا فهو خير له وأن تصوموا خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون, if you would know the rewards of fasting and the benefits of fasting. And that's again shows the importance of knowing the good deeds, and that when the ilm in kuntum ta'lamun by itself is such a virtuous thing. And it's repeated in the Quran, in kuntum ta'lamun. If you would know, you would see that fasting is better for you. So when someone disobeys Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or doesn't do the good deeds, it's a lack of knowledge. It's the ignorance that makes the person in that state. And it doesn't have to be information, because the ilm is what affects the person. So the more the person gains ilm, gains knowledge, the more that he would be upon the good deeds and the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and so on. So because of the time, we'll stop here inshallah with these two verses. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept inshallah, and we'll continue inshallah ta'ala with Shahr Ramadan, but tomorrow inshallah between Maghrib and Isha inshallah. Do you have any questions? No.
If you are sick or traveling, whether you do fasting later on or every day,
Oh, no. For a person that is traveling or sick, فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرَ, he has to make up the days after Ramadan. The ones that would feed the poor are those who have no ability to make up the days after Ramadan. The very old person and the one that has a permanent sickness. These are the people that would give the fidya, because there's no chance for them to make the fasting afterwards. Jazakumullah khair.
you said like fast. If you're fasting, fast in a perfect way, right?
If you fast?
If you're fasting,
Uh-huh.
you might fast in a perfect way, like
No.
you might
Right.
try to make the best of it, right? So like we're here and we're working for like 9 to 5, and you said one of the virtuous deeds while fasting is reciting Quran. So like there are a lot of virtuous deeds we can do. Like what practical deeds would you suggest, like when we're fasting and we're working 9 to 5 here?
Now, when someone is working from 9 to 5 and it's during Ramadan, and since the best of the deeds is to recite Quran, what is the best thing that a person should do? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Be obedient to Allah, fear Allah to the best of your ability. And if someone is working, then he should do the best he can with his work, so that he does not affect his contract between him and those who he work with, because this is an obligation upon him. So seeking rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but again, to put more effort when it comes to Ramadan and the night prayer and then fasting, this can be challenging. So seek help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is the most important mean. And then never to deprive oneself from specific times in Ramadan. There are specific times where it should be treated and focused on very strongly, which is basically the salawatul khams, the 5 daily salah to be observed in the most perfect way. The obligations, of course, to fast, but the morning, the evening, salatul qiyam, even if a person is extremely tired, he can choose something that is, the prayer is not too long, but not to miss it. All of that, and to eat the meal of a suhoor later because it helps to have the ability to fast. And making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful one. Some of the companions, they would work, of course. And one of the incident of this Sahabi, and because fasting had made also into stages. One of the stages of fasting is that if someone sleeps at night, that means he cannot eat till the next day at Maghrib. So this Sahabi came from work extremely tired. He prayed Isha, and while his wife was preparing the food for him, he slept. So she said, "You're ruined." She said some words like means you lost it, because now he slept. So according to how it was in the beginning, that means he cannot eat till the next Maghrib. So when that happened, he came to the Prophet ﷺ, the verses were revealed afterwards to abrogate this. So they would work all day. So it's not haram or it's something bad. But if a person have means to, especially towards the end of Ramadan, to take days off if it's feasible, then this is a good thing with al-i'tikaf, with observing the most of the night in salah and ibadah. This is best for those who have the option to do so. Otherwise, seeking help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful. And having a portion of the Quran definitely to one's best ability to be recited on a daily basis. Yes. Yes, insulin shots does not break the fast, as the ulama they say. No, anything that goes swallowed, even if it's not even if it's medicine, that breaks the fast. Anything that goes through the normal passage of food, that breaks the fast for sure. But the shots, insulin shots is okay. Dialysis breaks the fast, as the ulama gave the fatwa of this. But insulin doesn't.
Fasting, like Allah says, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Perhaps it may. So some people may not achieve taqwa.
No.
Who are those people who will not achieve taqwa because they are fasting?
No. Anyone that fasts, because this is the deen of Islam, and he's a Muslim, and he's fasting for the sake of Allah, he will have a level of taqwa. But people are not in the same level of taqwa. So every Muslim, he has taqwa. But the more he increases his iman, the more his taqwa will increase. So everybody has goodness, as the Prophet ﷺ said, "Al-mu'min al-qawi khayrun wa ahabbu ila Allah min al-mu'min al-da'if wa fi kullin khayr." The strong believer is better than the weak believer, and there's goodness in both of them. It's not to recognize sins, but it's to show that there is goodness in every Muslim, but a person should excel. But it's opportunity for the person to perfect his taqwa because it's related to fasting. So if the wasf, if the characteristics of fasting is completed, the taqwa will be completed. And this is a qa'idah, this is a principle in the Quran. If something is given as a reward based on a characteristic, the reward is not just one thing. The more the characteristics is strong, the more the reward will be, according to the characteristics, and one of which is the more to perfect fasting, the more taqwa will be attained.
So some people, like Nabi Sallallahu said, that achieve nothing but hunger and thirst through the fasting.
No.
So what category is like?
No. رب صائم لم ينل من صيامه إلى الجوع والعطش. How many fasting person he only gets from his fasting hunger and thirst. ورب قائم لم ينل من قيامه إلا السهر والتعب. And how many people standing in the night prayer, they don't attain anything except sahar, being late at night, and tiredness. What is meant by that is that those who are not doing it for the sake of Allah. Those who are not doing it sincerely for the sake of Allah, that means the deeds are not accepted from them. Because the deed has to be with ikhlas, sincerity for the sake of Allah, and following the way of the Prophet ﷺ. So someone fasts because it's healthy, for example, or someone prays at night because it doesn't look good if he doesn't, then what goodness that person is doing to himself, he should do it for the sake of Allah. And then? Go ahead.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
استووا ترصوا اعتدلوا سوية الصف من تمام الصلاة استووا الله أكبر الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين عما يتساءلون عن النبأ العظيم الذي هم فيه مختلفون كلا سيعلمون ثم كلا سيعلمون ألم نجعل الأرض مهادا والجبال أوتادا وخلقناكم أزواجا وجعلنا نومكم سباتا وجعلنا الليل لباسا وجعلنا النهار معاشا وبنينا فوقكم سبعا شدادا وجعلنا سراجا وهاجا وأنزلنا من المعصرات ماء ثجاجا لنخرج به حبا ونباتا وجنات ألفافا إن يوم الفصل كان ميقاتا يوم ينفخ في الصور فتأتون أفواجا وفتحت السماء فكانت أبوابا وسيرت الجبال فكانت سرابا إن جهنم كانت مرصادا للطاغين مآبا لابثين فيها أحقابا لا يذوقون فيها بردا ولا شرابا إلا حميما وغساقا جزاء وفاقا إنهم كانوا لا يرجون حسابا وكذبوا بآياتنا كذابا وكل شيء أحصيناه كتابا فذوقوا فلن نزيدكم إلا عذابا. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. إن للمتقين مفازا حدائق وأعنابا وكواعب أترابا وكأسا دهاقا لا يسمعون فيها لغوا ولا كذابا جزاء من ربك عطاء حسابا رب السماوات والأرض وما بينهما الرحمن لا يملكون منه خطابا يوم يقوم الروح والملائكة صفا لا يتكلمون إلا من أذن له الرحمن وقال صوابا ذلك اليوم الحق فمن شاء اتخذ إلى ربه مآبا إنا أنذرناكم عذابا قريبا يوم ينظر المرء ما قدمت يداه ويقول الكافر يا ليتني كنت ترابا. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Inshallah ta'ala, tomorrow after Salat al-Maghrib we'll continue with the tafsir of Ayat al-Siyam, and specifically with Ramadan and the Quran, the ayah شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن. And hopefully also inshallah ta'ala we can prepare ourselves by knowing how the Prophet ﷺ used to be with the Quran in Ramadan. The same thing the Sahaba radiallahu anhum and the Tabi'een. So to do the best we can inshallah ta'ala. And we need definitely to have this azima or this determination before Ramadan starts. So to have the determination with sincerity, with truthfulness, as Anas ibn al-Nadr radiallahu anhu, when he said before the battle of Uhud, that if there's a battle, لَا يَرَيَنَّ اللَّهُ مَا أَصْنَعُ. If there's another battle, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will see what I will do. Because he missed the battle of Badr. So he regretted so much because battle of Badr, the Prophet ﷺ did not call the people to go out with him for the battle of Badr. It just happened by the qadr of Allah, but because then some of them or many of them missed it, because for those, the people of the battle of Badr, they were in a high level of virtue. So he said, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give me life and I go with the Prophet ﷺ, he will see what I would do. So this is before something happens, to have that determination, to have that strength. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what's in our hearts. It's not something that we need to, I say and you repeat after me, Allah, this is bid'ah. But rather Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees what's in our hearts. So to have that determination, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us life in the month of Ramadan, that we would do our best by the help of Allah, not from our own selves, because we're weak. We need the help from Allah. And there's a caller by the authentic hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, there's a caller in the first night of Ramadan. And we should pay attention to the Maghrib time of the first night of Ramadan. Many people, they miss that night because they don't know that the next day is Ramadan. Or they think that the first day of Qiyam, for example, is after they fast. No, the first day or the first night of Qiyam and Taraweeh is the night before you fast the first day of Ramadan. So to pay attention when is Ramadan is, and therefore that night is one of the nights of Ramadan not to be missed. And once the first night of Ramadan, there is a caller, as the Prophet ﷺ said, this caller would say, Ya baghi al-khayri aqbil, wa ya baghi al-sharri aqsir. O seeker of al-khayr, come closer, aqbil. O seeker of evil, aqsir, stay away. What does that mean? Because the gates of Jannah are opened physically and the gates of the hellfire are closed. That means all means of opportunities for people to do good. And that's ya baghi al-khayr, something that we need to reflect upon. O seeker of al-khayr. Baghi, that means that you want something. So if a person is truthfully wants khayr, this is a great opportunity for him if he lives for the month of Ramadan. So that means we need to strengthen the desire to do good now and tomorrow and when Ramadan starts, inshallah ta'ala, because there's a great opportunity for the person to be among the people of taqwa. So whether it's a person is a young person or old person, we should, our youth, for example, those who might be turning away from the deen in many situations, do they seek good? Do they want to be good? Do they want to be steadfast upon the deen of Allah? If they don't, that's a worst of a musibah than a calamity that they need to go back and revive the purpose of life and the tawheed and the meaning of La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. But if they say, yes, we would love to be good, we would love to be obedient to Allah, but temptations, life, this and that, or whether a person is old, doesn't matter. So if you are a seeker of good, come forward. Come forward. What is the meaning of aqbil? Aqbil ala, come forward to what Ramadan is all about. You will fast because you are a seeker of good, and you would find even sometimes people, they don't pray but they fast, which is, they should pray and they should fast. They should not be told not to fast, but they should be told to pray. So everybody fasts. So if you're fasting, then I'm not saying halfway or whatever, now it's made easy for you to attain all of what goodness means. So this is such a powerful caller that would call in the first night of Ramadan, Ya baghi al-khayri aqbil wa ya baghi al-sharri aqsir, the shayateen are chained and so on. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us steadfastness, and this ummah, that's why it can never be defeated. It has within itself, by the commands of Allah, the means of all goodness in this life and in hereafter, with the obligations, only with the obligations, and then you add to this with the optional acts of worship. There are a couple questions here that was sent. First question is it permissible to do Umrah on behalf of living people who are able to do it physically? Can husband do Umrah on behalf of his wife who is physically able to do, but her husband doesn't have enough money to go for Umrah for both of them, or wife has small kids? To make it brief, it is not permissible to make Umrah or Hajj on the behalf of someone that has the physical ability to do it. It's only permissible if a person is not physically able to, and he's still alive, but he's not physically able to, then someone else can do it on their behalf. But someone has the physical ability, but they didn't go for Umrah or Hajj, then it's not permissible to make it on their behalf. And in this case, intentions is very important, of course. And when it comes to a husband and a wife, if the husband has the means and he leaves his wife and his children in a secure environment and everything like this, he should go, seek rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the great news that he doesn't have to make Umrah on the behalf of his wife. Because when the woman that the other women sent to the Prophet ﷺ to complain about something, that the men are with the Prophet ﷺ and they make salah on the Prophet ﷺ, and she mentioned that they make Hajj and Umrah. And the women are not, because they're taking care of the kids and they're taking care of the homes and things like this. So what is then, as she said to the Prophet ﷺ with the words? This is the complaint. The complaint is that she wants rewards. She doesn't want to just to compete with them, and she wants to have the rewards. So the Prophet ﷺ, he liked her presenting her case. It's a beautiful hadith, and the Prophet ﷺ, he said that her obedience to her husband, يَعْدِلُ لَكِ ذَلِكَ كُلَّ, will give you all of this. If she is a good wife, that will give her all of these rewards that her husband, if he's a righteous person, is doing. So the husband, when he prays in the masjid, the wife, she's taking care of the children, she gets the full reward. If he goes for Hajj and Umrah and she doesn't because she's taking care of the kids, she gets the full rewards. Anything of goodness that he does, and she helps him because she takes care of the things that if otherwise he won't be able to do anything. That's why the importance of the wife in the life of a righteous husband is such a great importance, and the righteous husband would appreciate that so much, because she allows him by taking care of these necessities that he is now allowed to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to fulfill the obligation, she get all of that rewards by the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So this is a great news for the Muslim wife, and she should seek rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from this. The same thing when it comes to sometimes in Ramadan, the women, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for everyone. Like she's taking care of the child, she wants to pray Salatul Taraweeh, and she wants to enjoy Salatul Taraweeh, but then the child, small child, he will cry and things like this, so she stays away or a separate room. Also, as good news for such a person is that you are doing an obligation, and when it comes to rewards, inshallah ta'ala, if you have the sincere intentions, you get the same rewards as everyone else. And also the iman will be increased because you're doing something, you're taking care of a human being that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created. He made you a mean to take care of that child. So the rewards is something that we cannot even comprehend. And seeking help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a person should not feel bad. But at the same time, the husband also should make it easy for his wife that sometimes, or they can try to think of something where she can also enjoy the matters of ibadah, and even if it involves money. The masajid also should think of something where people can enjoy the acts of worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without the distractions, without the loud noise, without things that would distract them from the ibadah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us all to do what is right. The second question, that's the only question left, is can zakah money be given to a person without telling him that it is zakah money, but by guessing him as a miskin from his apparent situation? Those who are entitled to be given zakah, the poor, the miskin, and the rest of the categories, to know that a person is in need of zakah, this is a work that needs to be done by those who are giving the zakah. And as mentioned before, that originally those who are responsible for distributing the zakah, this is the job of the people of authority, because they have the ability to know who is poor and who's not. But when this is left to the individuals, it becomes a little bit more difficult. But we have to take that responsibility, of course, because it's your responsibility to make sure that your money reaches those who deserve to be given zakah. It's not like sadaqah or general sadaqah. And that's why, as a ruling, if you give your money as zakah money to someone that you thought he was poor, but then you discovered that he was not poor, you have to give the zakah again. You did not get a sin because you were deceived or so there's no sin, inshallah ta'ala, but the zakah does not get cancelled because you already gave it. Different than sadaqah. Sadaqah, you give sadaqah to a rich person without knowing, you get the rewards as if you give the sadaqah, it doesn't matter. But when it comes to the zakah is not our money, the portion of the zakah is not your money, and the fact that this belongs to a poor person somewhere in the world, that he's deprived of his right. And this is how the zakah is. Which brings another meaning, and I also want to repeat that meaning all the time. When we look at the obligations, and this is a very sincere advice, inshallah ta'ala, when it comes to the obligations, don't look at your rights. You have no rights not to observe these obligations except in the most perfect way. Like the zakah money. You don't have right to your money that is the zakah portion of it. This is not your money. So don't think of it, it's difficult for me to give the zakah because we have greed in ourselves. But when you think of it that this is not your money, would you love to be a thief? You like to steal people's money? No decent person would like to have this attitude. So the zakah portion of your money, which is very small, it is not your money. The time that you're supposed to do the obligatory salah, it's not your time. You have no rights to it whatsoever. This is the time that you commanded to observe the salah. So whatever business, whatever desires, whatever there is, it is not for you. You have no rights to it whatsoever. This is the right of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be observed. And so on. And at the moment of death, you won't say, I have the right to live for another 200 years. You have no rights whatsoever. Everything is by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are created, we die, everybody shall return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made a command upon us, the same thing with fasting. Do you have right to eat and drink during the day of Ramadan if you're healthy and you're not traveling? You have no rights of this whatsoever. Nobody would force you, but you have no rights. That food that you have, which is a necessity of your life, you have no rights to it whatsoever. This is the right of Allah that He forbade you, and you say سمعنا وأطعنا. So the same thing when it comes to the zakah, to make sure that it reaches those who are in need of the zakah. And the zakah, as we all know, covers the necessities only, the necessities that keeps a person alive. What makes us alive, this is what you can give for zakah. You cannot give more. So that can change just from time to time, but you cannot be given zakah for some extra luxurious things. It has to be the necessities, the bare minimum of someone to stay alive. So in that case, to make sure that it reaches those who are in need. If you know that this person is in need, do you need to tell them that this is zakah? No, it's best not to say that this is zakah. If you know that the person is poor and he's needy, you don't tell him this is zakah money. You can even slip it under the door. You can add it in his account. You can say this is a gift. If you know that that person is poor. When do you have to say that this is zakah? As some of the ulama, they say, if you're not sure whether the person is poor or not, and he's trustworthy, and you're not trying to humiliate him or anything, you just want to make sure if he's entitled for zakah or not. Or you can ask someone else. You don't have to ask him. Ask someone that is close to him. But as far as that you have to mention the zakah, no. Actually, you shouldn't mention that this is zakah money when you're giving it to the poor if you know that he's poor. One last thing is, if you're giving it to an organization or something like this, you have to have trust in this organization, that they have the knowledge of what zakah is and they're trustworthy people. And your zakah money is not to be given a portion of it to some logistics or some transportations or workers. This does not work. You have to pay the extra then, so that the poor people would receive your pure zakah money. And they should understand that when it comes to the zakah. And as far as al-amilina alayha, those who work to collect the zakah, this is by the people of authority, wallahu a'lam. And I hope it's clear, inshallah. Tfadl.
If someone is, you know it, and is heavily debted, taking riba,
No.
just to make his living and whatnot. But he has a loan which is paying the riba.
Yes.
Can you give him a zakat?
No. If someone has a loan,
It's not known whether he's qualified for a zakat or not, but knowing his current situation, he's asking everyone to give me a loan because he has
right.
to take care of the bank loan.
No. If someone has a riba loan with riba, and he's asking people to help him to pay off the riba loan, can you give him from the zakah money to pay off the loan? As we know that one of the categories of the people, masarif al-zakah, wal-gharimin. Al-gharimin, those who have debt and they're not able to pay it, it's time for them to pay it and they don't have the means to pay it. That means they'll be in trouble if they don't pay it. So they are one of the people that, one of the categories of zakah to give zakah to. But when it comes to someone that has payments and he's able to pay it, then he is not to be given from the zakah. If it's riba, it is not permissible to pay anything of riba. So if someone has a riba loan, there is the original amount of money, which is, say for example, you took $1,000 as a loan, and the riba is 500, for example. And the time has come for him to pay, and if he doesn't pay, he's going to go to prison, or something crazy is going to happen to him as a result of that. Then in that case, he is only entitled, and he's poor, he doesn't have the means to pay it, he's only entitled to be given the 1,000. But not anything, not even a penny with the riba. Riba is haram. What's going to happen? Of course, in this country, there's no rules where they're going to throw him into prison, for example. But in some other parts of the world, if they put him in prison, then in that case, maybe people would give him the money, even if it's riba, to save him from the trouble, as long as he repents to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But in situations like this, no riba is to be given. And if there's no harm is going to happen to him, if he filed bankruptcy, for example, then he is not to be given from the zakah money, especially that if he's able to work. So every situation is unique in itself, but as a rule, it is not permissible to pay the riba whatsoever for someone to save them from this.
To pay the riba, this is not the question.
Right.
The person who is asking,
Right.
he's paying riba,
Hmm.
and he's asking everyone, please give me something
Oh,
because I'm
not for the loan, but in general. Oh, someone has a riba loan and he's poor, and he's asking.
we don't know his poor.
Right. Assuming that he's poor, but he has riba loan, but he's asking for not to pay the debt, he's asking just to help him with money. Right? If he's poor And when it comes to zakah, we have to make sure that he's poor. So if it's zakah, and say for example a case where there's a person that is poor, he can be given from the zakah, but that poor person is a sinful person. He deals with riba. He's a Muslim, he deals with riba, he's sinful, but he's poor and he's in need for zakah. He can be given zakah, and he should be advised to stay away from the riba, but he can still be given from the zakah. Not to pay the riba, but because he's poor. You understand what I'm saying? And that's in the category of sins, like sinful, poor people. Can they be given zakah? Yes, in principle. No.
What do we do when we don't know anyone?
Right,
I want to give zakah, but I don't know anyone. Everyone, mashallah, has money.
right. If we don't know anyone that can be given zakah, and this is a problem.
I mean,
Right. What's the practice now, especially like for example here in America, you have masajid and you have organizations, but you have to trust the people, and they have a huge responsibility because they need to make sure that if they take this and they act on behalf of the people to make it easy for them, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward for those who would do such a thing, but then they have to make sure that they give it to those who are entitled for the zakah. So this is can be done with other Muslims, with Muslim organizations, to do it in the right way. Allah.
through PayPal, or do you have to give them by hand?
The poor person has to receive the money with whatever means, and it doesn't have to be in their own physical hands. They can be given, for example, money order, for example. They can be given checks. Anything that comes into the category of give, but you cannot give them goods. If it's zakah of money, you cannot give blankets for the poor people with the zakah money. It has to reach the money.
Do I get credit? Do I receive reward if I pay the zakah with a credit card on the website of the organization?
You have to give zakah, your zakah money. So as far as using the credit card to pay the zakah money, using the credit card and...
Sorry, the bank card. It's same as cash.
Okay, then you make it easy for me. Jazakallah khair. So that's good. So use the debit card. That means it's going to come out of your account right away. Definitely, sure, no problem. MashaAllah. Allah reward you for doing so. And not the credit cards. No. Exactly.
People who are victims of earthquake like in Turkey recently, can we give zakat?
The people with the earthquakes in Turkey and elsewhere, can they be given the zakah? With a little bit details, they definitely should be helped, and every Muslim to the best of their ability should help them. But when it comes to zakah, you have to make sure that the money that you would give to those who would make the money reach, they are trustworthy, and it's given as money and not as commodities or goods. This is different than sadaqah. Sadaqah, you can give blankets, you can give food, but when it comes to zakah, it has to reach the poor. First of all, a person might be affected by the earthquake, but they're rich. So then they're not to be given zakah. But if they're poor and they're to be given money, and the people would make sure that it reaches the money, then this is permissible. No, تفضل.
Sheikh, you mentioned that to give it to organization. Unfortunately, there is a big percentage of organization in this country, they don't follow the rules of zakat. Some of these organizations, even they keep the zakat for a year after.
No.
And some of them, they give it to building a masjid. And as the eighth category for zakat, masjid does not include the zakat. So this is...
Wallah, you're right. And that's why when we say organizations, you have to make sure that they're trustworthy, their work is right, they're not doing things fishy, they understand the rulings of zakah. And it's true that many of them, they keep the money for a long time, or they use it for other things, or they use that money for paying salaries of things. So and there is this notion also of, as long as there's benefit, then that's the deen of Allah. This is being wishy-washy with the deen. This is deen. This is not our own opinions of things. And zakah has very specific rulings. When it comes to general sadaqah, sure, whatever they see is feasible. That's why you have to be extremely careful with these things. Wallahu a'lam. Naam, jazakumullah khair.
Last question. There is an organization, they take zakah money, but they give the charity to widows and poor people. So, but they don't give it all in lump sum. They give them like a salary on a monthly basis throughout the year. But they take the zakah once, right? end of the year. So is that permissible to give them?
Well, if there's people who give zakah on a monthly basis to the poor, there is an issue here, because if your zakah money is due today, you have to give your zakah money, and to the best of your ability, it has to all reach the poor today or tomorrow or whatever, as soon as it can be, and it cannot be delayed. So, as a solution to these things, for example, if they give 100 families and a person gets out his zakah money, he should tell them, I want for the 100 family to distribute all of my zakah today. You can do this if it's not time for your zakah yet. For the next year's zakah, you can give that, and they can give them payments. And then another thing is, I'm not saying that this is something wrong, but also one of the things to watch for is that we should not think that we know what's benefiting for the poor more than the poor themselves. There's some level of greed that happens sometimes. Or this poor person, if I give him a whole bunch of money, he's going to spend it on candy for 1 week, and then he's going to come back and ask for more money. Who are you to say that? Let your boss say the same thing for you when it comes to your salary. It's time for you to give your salary. No, I know. If I give him salary after 2 weeks, he spend it all. It's his money. If he's poor and if he's entitled for zakah, and to calculate the zakah for the poor, that's why it requires some work. This poor person, he needs for his necessity for the entire year, say $1,000. You cannot give him more. This is what his necessities. Then it's to be given for the zakah. So if that poor person is like this, then he need to receive that money. If he's someone insane or someone that is having issues, disabilities, and he would say to you, please keep it with you and give me on a monthly basis so that I don't spend it, it's something else. But for us to decide that we know best what's best for the poor, and that comes also with it, no, I better give them food, because if I give them money, they'll use it in a foolish way. This is something that we should stay away from. Allah. No.
You mentioned in the case of the riba, if someone has a loan, they've taken a riba loan, another person who wants to help him, say only pay off the actual loan and not the riba. But is it okay for a person to use, say, the interest that's in his account? So in a place where there's interest, there's no option, you have to have a bank account which accumulates interest. Can you use that interest to pay off another person's riba?
No. Can use one's interest to pay someone else's interest portion of a loan. It's ظُلُمَاتٌ بَعْضُهَا فَوْقَ بَعْضٍ. Darknesses after darknesses. And we should not use riba. A riba, if a person repented to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from riba that he has, he should get rid of it, right? And it should not justify for a person to continue to earn interest, thinking that I would give it to some sources that is of, for other reasons and things like this. So if we only keep it to the case where a person repented to Allah, and he would never deal with riba for the rest of his life, but he has some riba money. What to do with this money? He should still, as the ulama, they say, to get rid of it in something that is not respected, something like bathrooms, roads, things of that nature. But as far as to pay off another riba, Allah knows best. Allahu a'lam.
The money in the checking account, not in the saving account. If you want to get rid of the riba,
that's right. Put it in the checking and some.
checking account,
No savings. And some checking, they have also interest, so it has to be without interest. No.
Can you give zakatul fitr instead of food money?
Can you what?
Zakatul fitr.
I'm sorry.
Can you give zakatul fitr in money instead of food?
Right. Zakatul fitr, according to the Jumhur of Ahl al-Ilm, Zakatul fitr at the end of Ramadan is to reach the poor food. You can give money to the masjid, for example, and the masjid will buy food and then make it reach to the poor as food. And this is the majority of the ulama. Zakatul fitr is different than zakatul mal. So Zakatul fitr has to reach food because of the clear hadith of the Prophet ﷺ.
So is it obligatory to give food, or is it like in this country it's really difficult to give food?
Right. It is obligatory to give it food, Zakatul fitr. Khilafan the Imam Hanifa rahimahullah, the majority, the rest of the Imam, that it has to be food because of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ was clearly فرض رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم زكاة الفطر صاع من تمر. Like this, he made the fard of the Prophet ﷺ, and then food is mentioned. And there was money at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and plus it's related to fasting and things like this. So it has to reach the poor food. And this is, if it's difficult, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help. If in a locality people are there sufficient and they don't have any need, then it to be moved to another locality. Some people love the food. They line up for when you give them rice and things like this. They're more happy than even money. So it's there are always cases, inshallah. No. Jazakumullah khairan. Anything else?
On the same topic, Zakat al-Fitr has to be food.
Right.
So some supermarkets in here, they have made a concept like they will make $10 or $15 bags of food, which you can pay and the store will keep with them and they will distribute to someone who is in need.
Sure.
We don't know. But they
If they're trustworthy, yes, that's good. Yeah, because it's gonna reach the poorest food. Yes.
we don't know what is there in the bag. Like
But if you trust them,